need to be nice.
We still have that vacancy, don't we?
We have, I believe we have one opening now. I'm pretty sure that the council has filled one of the openings.
Oh, good.
With whom? I don't remember her name, and Tony didn't CC me on the email, so I need to follow up with her so that I can get her engaged in this group. So
Please tell her when the meeting is.
yeah, it is a woman, Deb.
Okay, I hope she doesn't get cancer.
All right, we are recording.
That's like the last two did, so that's got a point.
It's a scary place for a woman.
It's scary for all of us.
Okay, well, we're now live and moving forward. So with that, I'm calling to order the
Good luck.
April meeting for the Sustainability Committee. We do have a quorum, so we can actually take action as needed today. So I think the first order of business is the minutes that Jamie provided us. Is there any discussion warranted from those minutes? Seeing none, can I get a motion to put those in the record? So thank you, Dave and Deb,
Yes,
and
And since we have no one from the meeting on Zoom, we can just do a straight up all in favor, all opposed. We don't need to do roll call.
oh,
Here.
cool. That's nice. That's different. That's
Right?
back to non-COVID days. Okay, all in favor?
Yes.
Thank you.
Thanks for preparing those, Jamie. We have an agenda. And I think we pretty much won't have time to take any additional items, but if anybody has something that we want to get in front of us, make sure you bring it up at the very end of the meeting when we set the agenda for next meeting. And with that, Jamie, do you have that agenda handy?
I do. It's really just Kevin.
Okay, so
Did Kevin
now
show it first?
our old business, as you know, we began the discussion about what are our activities associated with the adoption of the new comp plan? And one of those things that we're kind of tasked with or charged with is the built environment. And we wanted to see the comp plan kind of has us looking at, are there ways that we can get sustainable building practices involved in the growth that is happening in Scarborough? And so one of the things that we talked in prior meetings was, what are some of those construction or material that could help us inform us as we start to look at the built environment and how we might be able to integrate more sustainable practices in that environment. So we invited Kevin Freeman from Laundry French, and he's here this morning to talk about building materials. And I don't want to take any of his thunder. And I'm sure he's going to hit in the subject of the embodied carbon that is in materials and how that has to be part of our discussion. So at this point, maybe we can just go around the room and give a name to a face. So Kevin, and well, those that don't know Kevin will now know Kevin. So Kevin, I've known you for many, many years. It's a pleasure to see you again. And thanks for taking your time.
Yeah, thank you.
David Kirstein, member for some years.
But a while.
Anson Bodo.
Jamie Fitch.
April Scyther.
Who's
And-
a founding member.
Yeah.
I am.
And our planning director, Autumn Spear. Oh, there she
Oh,
is.
there's Autumn.
Is-
I didn't even pay
She's
attention.
on Zoom with us.
Good morning, Autumn Spear.
And Kevin.
Well, thank you. I've lived in town for 25 years. This June will be 25 years since my wife and I moved over from South Portland, built a house on lonely Broad Turn Road at the time. And we've seen a lot of development around us.
I've seen the
since
traffic.
we've been out there. I just wanted to give you a little background. I'm originally from Millinocket. I worked with Great Northern Paper Company, 1980 to 1986, and lost my job after the Big A Dam was voted down. And ended up going back to college and moved down here to the Portland area in 1986. And I went to USM. I'm a political science major. When I came into the job market, I ended up going back into paper mill work and calling on paper mills and eventually doing construction in the paper industry through the mid-90s. Through 1998, I worked with Abington Constructors out of Portsmouth, doing paper mill plants, power plants, and anything that utilized web process technology at the time. In 1998, I switched over to general construction, working with Alliance Construction out on Pleasant Hill Road, right across from Hannaford's headquarters. And I've been in the industry ever since. And it's funny, I'm now working with Landry French in the same building that I was working in 1998. I do business development, but I have been in the industry and in construction for about 35 years. When we originally were approached by Jamie, the plan was to have Mason Rowell, our pre-construction manager, VP of pre-construction now, to join me. Mason has worked with me in putting together this presentation, and we've had conversations amongst our estimating staff about the use of advanced construction materials, but also, more importantly, almost it's the approach, the actual practices that we employ in building. And it's funny as it was yesterday, I was seeking out sunshine, and I did see it for about 3 minutes in Berlin, New Hampshire. We were up there looking at a hospital project, but I was in the car a lot, and I was just kind of thinking about coming in today. And about 15 years ago, I really considered it an honor. I was asked to be on a committee with Dave Early from the University of Southern Maine, who is a Scarborough resident, and Dave Barber from the University of Southern Maine.
Dave Barber, but he was the owner of Barber Foods, right?
No, Dave Barber, who was,
because he was on our board. David Barber from Barber
Oh, yeah,
Foods was
yeah.
on our board.
he was, Dave Barber that I'm referring to was the facilities manager at Bowdoin College, and then went to the University of Southern Maine, working with Dave Early, and John Grascio from Dartmouth College. And John Grascio was the director of facilities at Dartmouth, and he said like 15 years ago, he said, and we were planning a golf tournament, so I was getting real quality time with these guys. But John Grascio, in the end, it always comes down to how much does the building I have cost to operate? He said, that's the bottom line in my role at Dartmouth College. And it came into my mind yesterday, because that's really, ultimately we have to build the project for the budget that the owner can sustain. And, but more and more, we've been bringing in elements of sustainability ever since, I could go back to almost 25 years that we were employing green practices, or owners wanted you to consider it. So we put some stuff together here for you, and I'll just start right off. The number one is mass timber, and it is, as you talk about carbon, it's been used for a while. It hasn't always been called mass timber. It certainly was not cross laminate timber. But 20 years ago, I did a project at the University of Maine, the Student Rec Center, that had heavy use of glue lam and natural wood for the swimming pool area. And that was being employed, and that was at a time when, we were doing LEED, but LEED was really LEED was really just starting to become a conversation item. If you fast forward to today, almost every project we look at is considering using mass timber in some way, shape, or form. And what I find most frustrating is all the talk that we've had about, you know, here we are in Maine, of all places where we're just a breadbasket. But the biggest thing is that the majority of the mass timber that's being used on the few mass timber projects that have actually gone forth in Maine is coming from Europe. And it has a lot to do with this. There's a huge demand right now. It's mostly institutions that are causing it. It's coming in the mid-Atlantic area here in the East Coast. If we were out in Portland, Oregon, we'd be riding by mass timber buildings left and right. I was there 5 years ago and saw apartment buildings, mixed use buildings, offices. I mean, readily being used in other parts of the country, but it's coming here slowly, but it's definitely coming. The demand for it, and so the closest manufacturer of cross laminate timber is in Quebec, and it's Nordic Structures. Nordic Structures, if you ever get down to Portsmouth and go into the old Pease Air Force Base, there's a 3-story cross laminate timber office building on the old Pease Air Force Base campus, and Nordic Structures was the supplier, and it was built by Aberthaw Construction out of Massachusetts. Here in Maine, Nordic Structures was called on by Princeton University. Princeton University has got like this massive building program going on, and Nordic Structures is supplying product for 3 buildings on that campus, including a large library project. And it's really hard to get into their production schedule right now. So as Bowdoin was going to develop the new Perry Hall up in Brunswick, as the ecology school was being built down in Saco, the 317 Maine Community Center that just opened in Yarmouth, most of that product is coming from Europe, and it's KLH is the company out of Austria. And if you notice the wood that's being used over here across the street on the Hebert project at the old fire station, I've noticed that Binderholz. So there are some elements of their
Yeah, Vesta Housing is latched on to those.
Yeah, and typically on the housing, it's been the stairwells. So instead of using block, they've been using it. It goes up efficiency. It goes up really quickly, and that's probably the number one thing about cross laminate timber is that the erection time is really fast.
Yeah. Do you know where the product is coming for the USM student center?
Yeah, USM got theirs from Timber Lab, but Timber Lab has now opened a facility in Piedmont, South Carolina.
It's amazing that, you talk to the wood industry and why can't they diversify? What's going on with those guys?
It's the investment, and that's why I wanted to put this stuff up to let you see. This Smart Lamb moved, and they bought an old Blue Lamb facility in Alabama. They were one of the companies that was considering going to either Lincoln or Millinocket, but they bought an existing facility and they retrofitted it. And then Timber Lab, who did supply that, and that's a beautiful job.
Yeah. But it's funny, the dormitory is steel structure right next door.
No, the dormitory is what's called nail laminated timber. And so
I didn't
that is-
see that when I was just on
Yeah.
that site, really?
Yeah, it's nail laminated timber, so it is considered
Good
to
to
be
know.
a cross laminate timber project. So Timber Lab just opened a plant in Piedmont, South Carolina. Structure Lamb, so they actually supplied the panels for the 317 Main Community Center up in Yarmouth that Zackow Construction built. Structure Lamb bought an existing facility in Conway, Arkansas. All these firms are from the West Coast. They're either Canadian firms or that have opened a domestic operation, or they're just starting east of the Mississippi providing production. This is an interesting one. Sterling Terralam they actually make the laminate, it's cross laminate timber that's used for the corduroy roads, like to go out on power lines, you know, they
Oh,
lay it
yeah,
out.
yeah.
And they now have certification to use that for panelized systems. And I have a friend of mine who's designing a new terminal, fixed base FOB terminal up in Millinocket, and they're using the Sterling Terralam system in the design. I mentioned Nordic Structures in Quebec. They've been around. They are just a tremendous company. And then one that I just thought I'd throw in
Yeah.
here is the new Timber HP operation in Madison, which is taking wood fiber and making insulation, which is that is gonna
That's
be a
pretty slick,
real
yeah.
game changer. The erectors for cross laminate timber, and these are just local ones that have been working around here. This is a new operation, Opal Build. Allied Cook here in Scarborough is having Opal Build erect panels from KLH in Austria at the College of the Atlantic for a dormitory up in Bar Harbor.
Yeah, can you help me out here? What is cross laminate timber?
So, okay, cross laminate timber, it's an engineered wood product that has the strength of structural steel.
Okay, so the advantage is to steel, it's lighter, cheaper.
It's lighter, it's cheaper, the carbon.
It's the embodied carbon now. You don't have to, look at what it takes to make.
And it's
steel.
renewable. It comes from a renewable source. And I apologize that at any point, ask a question. So in Maine, and I'll just show you some of the jobs that are ongoing. This is the panels that were being erected for the 317 Main in Yarmouth. That's a music hall, so the acoustics of it all are pretty interesting. Though I must say, on Bowden's project, they found that they had to put in some acoustic
Tiles.
tiles up high because they were getting a lot of echoing through that building. This is the University of Southern Maine Student Rec Center that PC Construction is building right now. And that's a blended building. So the first 3 bays, the exterior bay and the next 2 bays in are cross laminate timber. And then the back part of the building is traditional structural steel. It's a gorgeous building. That is a big upgrade for you, man.
Who did the Westbrook project? The one in the Rock. That big office building?
That has not been constructed. The building that's currently under construction is Landry French.
Oh, you guys are doing that.
The medical, that you can see it from the main turnpike.
Yeah. Oh, I didn't know you guys were on that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah, we were working on that very heavily last year at this time. We have not built a cross laminate timber project yet. We have people in our company who have, but we're in development for the Mayflower Hill Residence Hall at Colby College in Waterville. That has put us in touch with all of these. So we've had conversations ongoing. It looks right now that we'll have to go KLH. Interestingly, the Structure Land company had no capacity at all because they were building Walmart's new headquarters, which is multiple buildings. And they were totally committed to all the production going towards that project. And Walmart put it on hold. So they were only doing one building. Now all of a sudden, structural land is available and just letting everyone know. But that's the nature of what the industry is like, because everybody and their brother are proposing to go this route right now. The Scarborough Library is considering it. We have there's a project that's being proposed up in Farmington that is melding pre-engineered metal and CLT. And it just keeps happening everywhere.
And this product is cheaper than steel?
Not necessarily,
Okay,
not necessarily. The cheapest product that you can get and the most available is what is being produced in Europe. And that's why a lot of it is going. And I just wanted to mention, this is the latest one, and this is the Portland Museum of Art. And they are proposing to go with a cross laminate timber structure for the big addition that they're planning. And actually, the architect, which was just chosen, Lever Design out of Portland, Oregon, they're doing a presentation which is sold out on Monday night in Portland. They're talking to an architect. It's called Architox, and Scott Simon's Design out of Portland is part of the team. So that's number one.
It's easy to picture what cross laminate means. What's mass timber mean?
It's the overall of using timber.
Oh.
So glue lam applies. It's just a different product than cross laminate timber, where the engineering is to build strength in it. Glue lam was really using Doug fir, layering it like, you see, it's been used for years. But the engineered cross laminate timber has the strength. It has a lot more strength, and it's been accepted through the IBC and all the codes. It's just been used in Europe for decades. In the United States, I think the largest building is in Milwaukee, and it's like a 17-story structure.
I mean, we've been using it for years and years and years. Pelletized beams that you see in garages instead of having the I-beam put in and the lolly columns. So it's been there. It's just now people are starting to figure that this is the way to go.
Yeah, I was at a college and university conference in Albany about a month ago, and I just happened to, a guy I was eating breakfast with, he was the vice president of facilities for Princeton. And he was saying, we not only have all these buildings coming that are under construction that are all employing cross laminate timber, he said, but we have to rethink how we do our maintenance once these buildings come online.
Yeah, you're not gonna drill through.
And because it's like all of a sudden, boom, everyone's got it on their campus. And I had heard that somewhat from Bowdoin College last summer. I had run into their facilities director, and he was saying, making that change for the acoustics, that there were things that they have to adapt to because, they just haven't had that type of construction on their campuses. So next, Jamie.
Yep.
So so that's number one. The other construction practice that has really taken hold is passive house. It's a super insulated envelope, airtight construction, high performance windows, triple glazed windows. There's elements where you try to eliminate, you try to really protect a thermal bridge in a building. And there's a lot of detail that goes to that. And as Rick knows very well, the heat recovery ventilation is a big.
The tighter you make it, you've got to consider that.
So this rose out of net zero buildings where you're just coming out equal on energy use. It was a residential use primarily coming from Europe. come from Germany specifically. But it's been taken on to commercial applications slowly. In 2016, when I was working with Martini Northern over in New Hampshire, we built the first commercial application, multifamily senior housing in Guilford, New Hampshire. The first one in Maine that was commercial, Wright Ryan built about 3 years earlier up in Brewer, the Village Center.
Was that the Brewer or was it the one in Portland? The multifamily house in Portland?
No, it was community housing in Maine.
Okay, okay,
In
so it
Brewer.
was in
And
Brewer.
then that one.
Okay,
the
'cause
green
we were
one-
involved in, Efficiency Maine was involved in the one in Portland.
Yeah, the Portland Housing Authority built one right along the Franklin Street arterial.
Yeah.
And I almost think that was CWS Architects across the street here.
I can't remember. I know it went Maine Advanced.
But it was Wright
Buildings.
Ryan who built that as well.
But you're doing the one on Valley Street.
We're doing Valley Street right
And
now.
that, your guy, I don't know, remember his name, but when I took a tour, he was dynamite.
Was it
he-
Chuck Pollock, the
Yes,
superintendent?
yes.
Yeah.
Boy, he knew the details and showed me where on the bridging that, just fantastic.
So I mentioned the bridging because that was something on that project that we did not encounter in New Hampshire. So the next graphic really kind of shows what I. So the key to it, and it was really something on the project that we did in New Hampshire. Because the subcontractors, as much as they said, yeah, we know what we're getting into, they really didn't know what they were getting into. Quite honestly, I don't think our own people realized what we needed to achieve to get a passive house standard to it. So the best way to do it is to build a mock-up and just show people what they need to do. We only lost, by the way, on that job in New Hampshire, one subcontractor who said, no, I can't do it. My bid won't support it. Everyone else bought in to the job. But the key is the insulation below the slab on a building. And it stays sealed all the way up through the structure. So you basically you weld the insulation together. Welding being in for a plastic. And it's layers of rigid, and then you put this seal over the rigid below your concrete. And that seal stays, so you get that super tight envelope the entire way up. So I guess I've said the same thing over on that, but I just wanted to be able to show it on this. On the job that we're doing on Valley Street in Portland, there's parking, there's 2 levels of parking. So it's a podium building where the first 2 floors are structural steel. And then the upper floors are wood. And it's that point where the steel and the wood come together that you really have to insulate and seal. So here's the building under construction. In 2023, it's for Avesta, but one of the things that caught me on it was, so in 2016, when we built the one in New Hampshire, it was a Yarrow window, triple glazed window for passive house, came from Finland, and it was the standard. On this project, 5 years later, the triple glazed windows are from Matthews Brothers in Belfast. And if there's any theme that you're hearing from me is that, to me, if it's truly sustainable, you're getting your products locally. And that's not always achievable. But to me, and it's kind of how Mason and I, in talking about it, you'd like nothing more than to have your cross laminate timber supplier. Number one, if you have to go to Quebec to get it, at least he's only, 300, 400 miles away. But we're going right now, most of the projects are coming over on ships.
And there's the embodied carbon right there.
Yeah. So I was
Right
talking to Matt Cook from Allied Cook, who's doing that job in Bar Harbor. And they're getting their product from Austria. It's being shipped over to New Jersey and being trucked up. to Bar Harbor for the project. And you know, it's just how it is right now. So we could go to the next one. So the other passive house materials that we see, you know, using bio-based spray insulation is, you know, especially where you're trying to get that, all the cracks. The rigid insulation is used a lot. The triple glazed windows are a major component. They actually do blower tests on the building to ensure that everything is tight. And so Chuck was pulling what Harry has left.
Trying to get that 0.6.
He was trying to get to that number and you're taking thermal guns, just checking and it was a process to get there. The other thing is because the building's so tight, you really have to have the low VOC paints and adhesives, and that goes for the flooring as well.
VOC means
Volatile organic compounds. That smell you get from, you know, like new carpet. You know, you want to reduce that as much as you can because the building's so tight that it just adds an extra layer to what the person would be smelling inside. And then water conservation on the water fixtures is again you know, so all of these are really and then of course.
But one more step beyond just the ERVs is going all electric. Instead of having combustion appliances, whether it's a boiler or a stove, a propane or natural gas stove, you're trying to get rid of the combustion.
Yeah, and that's huge in California right now. California is converting big time. And it was funny, and it's part of kind of influence things, but this Architect series has been taking place all through the month of April in Portland, and I heard a Los Angeles-based architect about 3 weeks ago talking about that very thing about like they've changed over their office so that it's like all electric.
Well, that high rise that's going on in Federal Street, that's totally all electric.
That will be all electric.
All electric, and it took a while to get to that point because of utility and having the capacity. But they're using the Maestro system. Valley Street's using the Apora or
The Polka.
Apoca.
Yeah.
Yeah, Todd's thrilled about it.
I knew
can't wait for
when I
that.
started on mechanical, I had Rick here to help, because he knows way more than I do. But here's where we're going to that, the high efficiency heat pumps. You know, and I heard on public radio last week where they were saying, you know, you always hear, oh, these heat pumps aren't going to be able to handle a Maine winter. They can.
We proved it.
We built my wife and I built an ADU for her parents, and we're heating it with a single heat pump. And we have a row of electric baseboard in the bedroom, and we have in-floor electric in the bathroom.
Mhm.
And we turn those on when it's gonna be really cold, but I mean, we've now had it for like 5 years. And you know, we keep the heat down lower than my in-laws would like, but
Which
it works.
makes me really, you probably all read that article about insurance with electric heat pumps. Insurance companies are balking at providing insurance to an all-electric or all heat pump house.
They have trouble with pellet boilers as well.
Do they? But yet, we used to use baseboard resistive and nobody complained about that.
Yeah,
So, you know, there's the naysayers still are out there saying it's not right. And
so
It's a myth.
we're finding, so on the passive house, and again, Rick can do a better job of explaining it than I do, but what we're finding is with these systems that we're now employing there, and they're almost like being at they're almost unit by unit, is because it's so tight, because the building's so tight, you have to have air exchange. And it doesn't require as much heat because it's so tight and the windows are so tight. But the the energy recovery ventilation and working in tandem with the heat pump. The latest generation of heat pumps that are coming up almost combine it. And
The rooftop units do now.
so I mean, it's the increases are just incredible.
What about getting fresh air into the building?
That's the ERV.
That's the ERV. That's what brings in the
It's the theory of bringing in fresh air, but as you're exiting the air inside the building, it's warm. And so you're not mixing it, but you're preheating that air coming in. The heat pump doesn't have to work as much to bring it back to the ambient temperature.
Because I was thinking, is sick building syndrome still
This,
a thing?
yeah,
um,
but that takes care of it.
you know, in the last sick building that I can think of is that elementary school in Saco. That
The one that was on Munjoy Hill too, that had the mildew issue and that was a sick building. The elementary school,
oh, the elementary,
the old.
the old
yeah,
elementary school.
yeah.
Cause I can remember, I had done work with Bill Turner.
Bill Turner.
Bill Turner was like the expert in evaluating the
Mold and,
Yeah.
sick building.
So this is a real game changer, and it's in particular, these are the photos of the Apoca system, which they're all going to, all the developers, all the multifamily that we're looking at are going to these systems. It's an Italian-made product, but the innovation is just way beyond what, and I think it's gonna just keep improving.
It's the next generation.
So we're using it more and more, pricing it more and more, and there's a United States distributor for it. Next. So, and then almost every one of them employs photovoltaic solar and typically roof mounted. The one we did 5 years ago in New Hampshire, it's the hot water. The hot water is run off a solar heater. You know, the photovoltaics, reduce greenhouse gas emissions, they reduce electricity that you're buying. You know, the water consumption is less. Solar, it works everywhere. This is just kind of mine. I think it's less expensive and less.
Well, you're not using up any real estate.
When you
It's
do a roof
already-
mounted, you do a
Yeah.
roof mounted system and it just, but it's here to stay. I saw a massive one yesterday. Cause I drove to Berlin, taking 113 up through Brownfield. I think it was Hiram. All of a sudden I looked to my left and it's
Really in Highland.
huge solar farm. And kind of hidden,
We
but
got a few coming in Scarborough,
Not huge, but yeah.
but yeah, 5 megawatt.
yeah, well,
Well, I think those are still 5 megawatt and below.
and I think that company that is doing that was getting in all the approvals before
Mhm.
2022. There's a lot of those 5-acre installations that are gonna be taking.
The turnpike in Augusta, the cloverleaf,
Yeah, DOT is doing a lot.
that's all
in
been
there.
now infilled with solar.
Yeah, that's been something, because it's not just that exit. It's
No,
like
you know,
other
you gotta go and you come down south and you see more.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We were, I'm on the board of Day One, which is a substance use for kids, and we were in Wyndham going through approvals to do a girls' residence for substance use. And in front of us was one of the solar companies, so every time we were going up for the approvals, they were in front of us, and it was the fall of 21. And there was some pushback from the neighbors, but
It's still a good deal to put it on the
yeah,
roof building.
I think the solar is great, and the technology.
Well, of course,
really-
going has come to where it's now the ROI, it makes sense.
Yeah. Next, please. Other areas, those are the two predominant. The mass timber, cross laminate timber and passive house that are driving really the market. But This ICF, insulated concrete forms, has been around for a bit. There aren't a lot of people that use it or do it. But this is Consigli did this down in Saco. It's the main molecular facility when they did their expansion. And they remember they used to be in Scarborough right next to Abbott. And it's an insulated, it is what it says, it's an insulated concrete form. You pour in between the insulation. It's extremely energy efficient, airtight, soundproof, and a
There's an all-woman company in Maine that sells that. Michelle Atherton, you know,
oh, I don't know her.
yeah, she was one of our founding board of directors, and her company sells that product.
We did, when I was with Martini, we did Applecrest Farms in Hampton Falls, New Hampshire. And that building is an ICF building. You'd never know.
Oh, it's a beautiful building. My family loves going there.
Oh, so you went, so the bistro and all.
Oh, yeah. Oh,
Yeah. Yeah, and, but they were, the owners at the time, they wanted, energy efficiency and, the work was done by Groen Construction, which is out of Somersworth, Rochester, New Hampshire. But, this is just another thing that we see out there that you see it, but you don't necessarily know about it. So, next.
Well, they use it in residential construction too.
Yes, yes, they do.
Anytime you have to build the
Absolutely.
foundation,
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's not an industrial thing.
and you don't have to paint it black down and below, you know?
Yeah, they show it on this old house too.
Yeah, it's been around. It really has been around and, but you just, you're right, you see it more in residential and it's rarely that you see it used in commercial. So the other thing Mason and I get going on was the interior environment is becoming more, and especially post-COVID, being able to have structures that have, natural light and day lighting, the glazing that's used today, you can have it that it's got almost the shaded, is in it. The LED lighting has just been a phenomenal improvement. Again, using low VOC products and trying to use those water conserving methods, which all came from LEED originally. This is we did the Harvey Performance Plant out in Gorham, out there by Moody's property. And the architect just did a great job. I mean, this is a manufacturing facility. It's machining, and they were able to use natural light for the office and cafeteria areas and cafeteria there, but they also bring it into the manufacturing area. And you can see from the building, well, it's not a very good shot, but I mean, there are windows on the building, but the lighting, lighting is just, the indoor working environment is just, it's just so important to have it. And we think that that's more design driven, but the products are out there to support it. Next. These are just some examples, and I've got the same things up here, but this was, we just did the Shook Center up at Waterville for Colby College. And it was a architect from New York City, and she really brought it about. See old Stearns department store property in downtown Waterville. And just her use of glazing on it, and this was a shot that was taken on opening night, and it's just an open feeling building. And you just love to see more of it if you can. I think what Town and Country Federal Credit Union did when they built their operations center behind Hannaford, I mean, that is great natural light in that building. And also the Hospice of Southern Maine, the new building for Hospice of Southern Maine, which is like a really great example of of energy efficiency and everything that I've been talking about is in that project. So lastly, is the outdoor environment and how do you build that sustainably? Wish that translated better, because I just think it's the best part of the Downs is the Score Builders building. in
That was
the
their first
innovation-
one too.
In the innovation district. I mean, that just uses, when you talk about using natural environments, it's got the seagrass and, there's not a lot of irrigation going on that site. I know this is all, I'm preaching to the choir here, the fertilizers and the pesticides and all the municipalities going with green products for that. Tying into stormwater management and energy use and lighting, all of these, and including, reducing impervious surfaces and, the more you have, the heat islands are more likely to happen. This right here, and it's interesting, it's Aceto Landscaping who's doing a lot at the Downs, but they're doing this pocket park. That's part of our, the 18-story building that we're doing in downtown Portland. And even on that, in an urban environment, you've got, they're gonna have trees for shading. And there's a water feature in the, reuse of a water feature. And, I know that there was one area that I felt, when Mason and I were talking. So I know some of this that you're talking about is code, how will future codes be done in Scarborough and, we're not huge fans of structured parking. I mean, you don't want to have to do a parking garage if you don't have to. But somehow, I think Portland has done a good job of adapting. Of course, it's a far more urban environment, but they're not even requiring parking spots anymore on the peninsula. They're doing building with, they're not putting that onus of having structured parking on a project, which can drive up costs quite a bit. And I know in Scarborough, that's one that, we still continue to be above the norm. I mean, is zero the answer? No, because we're an urban, we're a suburban community. But are there ways to kind of reduce what's required on the parking side? And some of that can be done through using impervious, blocks, using the blocks and trying to make it a little more sustainable.
The Hannaford in Bangor, the first LEED Platinum grocery store in the country by Hannaford up there. They use, their whole parking lot is also their geothermal field. And so the rain goes through the parking lot to refill the wells.
Yeah.
But that's, again, it comes down to first cost.
It's first cost. It's first,
In
I think it's in Augusta.
Augusta,
It's in
I'm
Augusta.
sorry, I
Yeah.
said Bangor, it is in Augusta, yeah.
It's the first cost. And that's why on Passive House, they're being used on a lot of subsidized multifamily projects, because if they put it into their first cost and go Passive House, their operating costs, which they won't have as much of, aren't adversely affected by it. It's a different story.
There's that long-term thinking, and that's the thing I think.
Yeah, that's the long-term thinking, yeah.
Overland guy said that as soon as he got building services to agree to a 10-year operating costs with the construction costs, rather than just the construction costs, opportunities were entirely different.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
It's a matter of structuring this.
So, we did get into, we decided not to put it into the presentation. I think it would have been more apt had Mason been available to join us this morning. So we are seeing some challenges with the city of Portland's adoption of the 2021 IBC codes.
The stretch code.
And it's really coming out of the trades. That, you know. And there's an associated cost with it, and just one example, and I'll try not to botch it too much, but. You know, most buildings will use a centralized most commercial buildings will use a centralized mechanical room. And where that room goes. Will impact cost. But we were saying, we have one project. Where the mechanical system was designed pretty deep into the building. And the codes are requiring heat tracing and insulation of the pipe. So you're making a long, so Mason was looking at costs, saying, well, why is our mechanical system so high? Because we're having to insulate all lines going deep into the building to this mechanical system, but also putting in heat tracing and the cost, just the labor costs for the trades is driving it up because it's just that much
Well,
more.
why are you running pipe? The only pipes you need to run is for domestic hot water and cold water.
Well,
If you have an all-electric building, you don't have pipes anymore.
well, on this particular one, we're not there. But where we went with the conversation, Rick, was why do we have a centralized mechanical system? You know, everything is going to, why can't you decentralize it, have multiple mechanical rooms, what's the cost? And, you know, so he's exploring all of that, but he said a lot of it, you know, because Scarborough was still by the 2015 codes and has not adopted yet, but that may be a further, I'm not really.
It's a moot point here very soon because the state's going to.
Yeah, the state's going there, but there are gonna be challenges from it, and I'm not really the person to speak about that. But I wished I could have had Mason come in because we are seeing it, because Portland has been the first one that's adopted it. So there may be some
Bit of a learning curve.
some ripples that'll be coming from.
It's getting, you know, the air exchange doesn't change between the 15 and the 21. So it's not about envelope or anything like that. It's the appendixes that South Portland is driving. They want net zero and all of that. That's what's causing, but that's the direction they want to go.
Yeah.
But adopting the 2021 is not a significant jump in savings between the 15. 15 to 18 is almost nothing. It's starting to get the practices, the construction practices. Your team, at least on that Valley House, he went through schooling and everything for that passive house project.
Oh, yeah, and you have to.
Yeah.
Yeah, you have
Yeah.
to. And
And we were talking about it early. It's the labor force.
yeah, well, that's where I was gonna go next before taking questions, but
That's our burden.
the labor is incredible. The challenges in getting people and getting qualified people. You know, I remember in 2009, 2010, I was with Pizzagalli and we built a new fire station in Saco. And I mean,
That one advanced building.
it was fantastic. It had geothermal, it had photovoltaic. And it had the best people from every company on it because we were coming out of the recession and it was just a super project because you had very talented people in a ready labor force. And now you're really struggling and you'll get a subcontractor for 2 days, and then the next day they're at another job, and you're constantly battling that. So I thought I had it in and I did not put it in, but panelized systems, prefabrication is something that's being explored far more. Panelized, you know, that's what Hebert
Comes in on a flatbed
and
truck.
that's been in use for 10, 15 years. Comes in easily assembled. We are looking at a project right now that will employ modular construction. There's a building over in Cape Elizabeth If you're familiar, remember where the Cumberland Farms used to be, right behind it. And it's Cape Integrative Health. The bottom floor is the practice. And then there's 12 two-story apartments, condos. And those came in 35 pieces from a modular supplier out of New Hampshire.
Well, manufactured housing is, you know, becoming more and more popular. Bring them in on wheels.
So you build it on a
Set them on a
controlled,
foundation.
yeah, you build it in a controlled environment. You take advantage of, not having to deal with the field conditions, but also to have a steady workforce that's doing it. Colby College just did that with their Johnson Pond houses. On the campus, they built, 4 50-bed dormitories. And they were built at, Ski Abbey up in Oxford. But we're seeing more of that. We're seeing more call for it. And it's all really kind of driven by labor availability. So anyway, I appreciate, I hope it helps. I hope the discussion helped, and if you have any questions, if I can't answer them, I'll get the answer from our team.
Yeah, well, it was very, very insightful and helpful. We've had lots of discussions as a committee on Asset House and, you know, the direction we think would be beneficial for the town. And I still think that is probably the Cadillac. The problem with Passive House is the cost associated with the certification and the work you have to do that. And my opinion is build to the standard, but don't have anybody, you're not required to spend to get that stamp. To me, that I wish we could get away from making or the industry putting so much weight on getting that piece of paper that said you did it.
Well, then who says you did it?
Right, but you have to go along the way and say, well, to make it, the owner wants to see it. They want to see that 0.3 ACH. But why do you have to spend $3,000 to show that to a corporate headquarters in order to get a piece of paper back that says, congratulations, you have a Passive House?
LL Bean has built green for a long time.
Oh, they were, yeah.
But they never seek certification until they started out with the breakout of the stores beyond Freeport. Most of those are now, they seek certification for.
It's just a shame.
They never did it before that.
Yeah.
Though they were building to those standards.
And I think that's where we can make an impact is we don't, as a committee or as a town, we could say to a construction or an owner or a developer and say, you don't have to go through that. Just show us local. Local verification is all we're looking for. I don't know.
Yeah.
Can we do that? Can we
Well, I don't know.
specify omitting this?
I don't know if there's the will to make that happen, but the concept is to go and build to that standard. And I think that's the message we want to get out there to the builders and to the designers. You should be aiming for this because of all of the benefits that are associated with it. But we're not going, as a town, I suppose if there was a funding stream in which we could incentivize that, then the town would say, just give us local proof. You don't have to go to headquarters and get that, the corporate stamp.
Yeah, it's that upfront cost. I think that most companies and developers, I mean, they really fixed on, they understand that the costs are higher and they're probably not coming down. They're certainly not going to go back, but then when you throw the interest rates on top of it. I was telling Rick this morning before we came in that someone said to me, like everything's a longer runway now, because there's just so many challenges that companies and developers are facing, and institutions are facing when they try to get a project off the ground, and then the latest being the interest rates. And but it takes longer to get the projects in place. You're waiting on materials. I didn't even touch on the getting electrical here. is.
That's the switch gear
that-
stuff, yeah.
Switch gears, automatic transfer switches. It is a huge item. And the delays are, beyond 52 weeks. I mean, it's incredible what you're having to wait. Everything else has kind of come back, the wood cost has come down and availability is there. But lighting and electrical is absolutely the challenge. And I
When you say lighting, what's the challenge in lighting?
well, just getting fixtures, it's copper, it's copper is in big demand. Most of the lighting fixtures come from China. And it's just, we're still dealing with the after effects of that. And but in particular on switch gears and ATS and anything related to supply power. Understanding is that Bowden has a building right now that is complete, except it has no power, and they're just waiting. And
Power supply, equipment is domestic or is that imported?
most is imported, but even the domestic, everything is backed up. The
Yeah,
delivery
because,
times.
because they can't produce it fast enough. You
Yeah.
can't get the imported product.
Yeah.
I don't think that problem's going away in the near term.
No, not until more production.
Happens onshore.
Yeah, and I was at the New England Healthcare Engineers meeting in Boston 2 Fridays ago. And the main subject was, especially for a hospital, an automatic transfer switch.
Switch,
They
yeah.
just, they need to be able to turn generators and it was like they had panel discussions and that was a big focus point. And it's that whole thing of, and these are for ongoing operations that they can plan for it. It's how do we convince our leadership that we really need to get this way ahead of time. And when you bring it to the construction side, it's, you're coming on board and you're almost late. You're late.
You're late,
Come on.
yeah. Well, Marginal Way, that the housing there that had the electrical problem, they couldn't get full power because they were waiting for the products to come from Mexico. And so all those residents, you remember on the TV, they had extension cords because they had 2 phases that were there. The 3rd phase they couldn't get.
Yeah.
And so they were, stuck because they couldn't get the switch gear.
So that's probably the first thing that we do when when we're looking at a project is to identify those long lead items up front. And then when you're brought on, it's like one of the first things you do is get them to understand the cost and the need to get the order in.
Any questions?
Can I ask like a naive, kind of like stupid, crazy question? Since this is not my field, I really don't know, but let's say, for instance, I'm a developer and I want to do the right thing and I want to build to this passive house standard, I'm putting in a development. What are the economic considerations here? Is building to this standard significantly more expensive than just putting up a stick-built house? I mean.
Yes. Yes, it is.
How much more? I was just thinking, obviously there's the kind of the environmental considerations and you feel good about it and it's low carbon and all of this stuff. But when so many decisions are just based upon dollars and cents and what's the cheapest in the here and now. Is this significantly more expensive? I mean, are there any economic incentives to kind of doing it this way rather than the way we've been doing it?
I think the heating systems are definitely being adopted by private developers. And
That's because the operating costs.
the operating cost
Safe,
is less and the upfront cost is not as egregious. We used to say that it was 20 to 25% to build a lead building. To add on to it and then about $50,000 more to get the certification, to get the certification. And, a lot of times those are breakers, certainly. One of the advantages, and I think it's gonna bear out, is, yes, you're paying more for cross laminate timber. But they go up really fast. You can erect a building very fast. And there's savings that aren't quite
Labor
quantified yet.
But let's say I was a big developer, just like the people that are doing the downs right now. I mean, what is there an incentive for them to build to these standards or? I mean, right now they're building to the old standards, right?
Well, they're building to 2015. That's,
Yeah,
Well,
and
and
our local ordinances.
yeah.
there would be an incentive if they were going to continue to own and operate the buildings there because the long-term operating cost offsets. But for companies that come in and just build a building and walk away, that's a harder sell. Where it can-
There's a combination of
Or build
some of Downs
bunch of
buildings
houses.
are going to be under control of a third party, but under the umbrella.
I mean, I think just like with LEED, when LEED came in, it's the institutions that really kind of literally lead the way. So you're finding that, when I mention most of these mass timber projects, it's an institution that's doing them. It's rare to have a private developer, which is what happened down in, at the Pease Air Force Base, that office building. I mean, that's a private entity that did it. That's very rare.
I see, I'm just trying to see how this committee could interact with the material that you presented. Now, obviously, if there's a code that goes in, everybody has to follow it. But if we adopt
It's the detached incentives, and so is there a
Yeah.
way for us to get involved and shift the timing of the incentives in such a way?
yeah, I mean, could you say to somebody, like, there are real incentives to doing this, and it's not gonna cost you anymore. Or it's not gonna be a significant cost, or it's gonna be a cost that for instance, a home buyer is what I'm thinking. That a home buyer would be willing to pay now because they know in the long run it would be less expensive for them.
And that's.
Rather than going in and saying, you've got to do this, this is an ordinance,
I think it's one of the things that I hope happens because. I'm not saying Scarborough, I'm saying the state,
Regionally.
everything. And multifamily is a way to build multiple housing units in a more economical way. Well, now you're gonna have these people living, hopefully they're gonna be living in this new type of building, this passive house building. So when they become first-time buyers and builders, they're gonna want that same kind of
Only
atmosphere.
if they know, there's a huge education, yeah.
Yeah,
They'll just buy the place and move in and be like, well, shit, what just happened here?
well, if they're paying the utility costs, they're saying,
Not
"Wow,
until after
this
they
is
moved
Yeah, they're probably
decent."
not paying utilities until after they've bought their own.
Well, multifamily homes, especially going all electric now, you see, yes, our existing stock, a lot of times you get rent, it includes heat. Includes heat, but no air conditioning because that's electric and tenants pay the electric. You go to an all-electric multifamily building, now you can meter. So the owner, the developer, now has a way to say, my costs are lower because I don't have to provide the heat. Because now it's on the tenant meter. And so the tenants are now going to be informed that, hey, it's on my dime now.
See, I don't know, I don't completely understand what the economic incentives would be for a developer to build to some of these standards.
Well, see,
No,
this is-
no, I don't, I agree with you.
I mean,
They don't.
if it's gonna be my building and I'm
Yeah.
gonna run it in the long run, absolutely, but if I'm gonna build it and sell it to you,
That's the
I
problem.
I just wanna be in and out.
And so that's where, have we gotten around to looking at what's going on in, I think it's Cambridge, Massachusetts, where they're doing some. I think some quality work in some of these gaps in incentives. So a building owner that's renting and now the renters are having to pay And so the building owner doesn't want to make the upgrades because the renters just have to pay. They've got some tools now. And I don't know what the tools are, and I don't know who's implementing the tools, and I don't know how much they're costing, and I don't know where the money's coming from. But I think we need to find out.
Yeah, Cambridge is very far ahead of a lot of other municipalities. And I think it's probably their housing authority that's involved in things like that, but just in terms of resiliency and climate planning and all of this.
And we have a Main State Housing Authority requires for funding to be received from Main State Housing, like the project by the old fire station. That's receiving Main State Housing funds, and therefore it is being told you have to build to this standard.
Yeah, there's a design
And
standard.
same thing with Valley Street,
But nobody is doing that for
not for
private
private,
market.
not for
Right.
market.
No, because
Right.
their funding source doesn't require it.
And that's what.
Right, if you're not seeking Main State Housing funding, you
Right.
have no, you're just building base.
I think the one incentive that they do have is their tenants and who they're marketing to. So I think, in my opinion, is that the generation coming up now, my daughter, my daughter and son-in-law, I mean, they look at things a lot differently.
Well, that's my
Then
point.
we
I
did
was trying to
30
make
years.
earlier. Is the market's gonna start demanding it because people become comfortable with that.
But I think part of the key to that is education, as Deb's been
Yeah,
saying.
I agree.
I mean, a regular consumer, your first time home buyer. The information is just overwhelming in terms of just buying the house itself, never mind the long-term cost of owning that house.
And for many first-time home buyers, it's always an economic stretch.
Always.
Always a stretch, and you
Right
go,
first.
yeah, you go, gee, if I can buy a house that's $15,000 cheaper than something else, I'm gonna do that. And I'm not really gonna worry about whether I have a really high energy, high.
Figure that out
capacity.
later.
This
Yeah.
is where if we could get into the real estate market and require. Like, here is like the documentation is, here is the house cost and here is the annual operating cost.
It could almost be looked at as like electric rates. I think if you could get the real estate or the banking, the financing piece of it to say, you build to this standard, your interest rate is X. You want to go base, your interest rate is this. And that's very much like the
Well-
utility structure where if they have heat pump structure. So if you're using heat pumps, you're on the heat pump rate, which is better than the base rate.
But what I'm thinking about is for. Like mortgage amounts, like if I can only afford this much house. But I could. My payments would be less like I could afford a higher mortgage if my energy payments were less, but the finance folks. Aren't doing that. There's no monitoring for that. There's
Mhm.
no. Math for that. Nobody's doing that.
Anyway, having spent most of my life in the finance business, I can tell you that banks are not equipped to make those kind of appraisals. To adjust an interest rate based upon whether you build an energy efficient house or not.
Well, and I'm
That's just
talking
not
about
the way the world works.
Well, it's interesting how that's starting to change because there is now a product called a municipal lease. So instead of, if a municipality today wants to do something, energy efficiency or anything like that, they can seek a municipal lease from a private bank. And the bank's security on that is knowing that it is a municipal building that's gonna be around for a long time. So they're not worried about, it going belly up. So,
Yeah, and there's a few other factors too.
and it's interesting how banks are starting to come online with that, and, it's a municipal lease. And now there's
That's for
CPACs coming,
municipal, but that's for municipal properties, that's
yeah.
not for the,
right?
and there's just this gap, and I don't know how to fill this gap.
See, I kind of like in my kind of like dream state here, best of all possible worlds. Wouldn't it be nice if some of these products, right, are competitive with existing products?
Yeah.
There would be, there's no economic disadvantage to building to these standards versus
Yeah.
doing what is currently required.
Unfortunately, I think what we need to do is get well, one thing we could do would be to have the more transparent costs on the different divisions of construction. You look at a commercial building, I suppose you could do it from a home. You say, okay, the foundation cost is this, the timber, the walls is this, the paint is this. And start to say, all right, now where do you want to go with all of this? Because I think we just take for granted that, oh, if we go foam insulation, that's gonna be this cost, because look, they're showing me the cost of that. Whereas they don't show you how much it costs to lay the concrete and all of that stuff. So transparency in the different divisions of construction, I think would help educate the consumer.
And you know, another thing too, though, is the, and as we're talking, we put in a new sliding glass door 2 years ago, and we put in a new front door year and a half ago. And it was driven by, you know, the one that we had put in for our in-law apartment was so much better
nice.
than the one
Yeah.
we had. And it's amazing how much we were getting, you know, I mean, we don't feel that cold around those doors with the new product that was installed, and the windows are so much better. And that's why when I was saying the whole thing, like, you know, like Matthews Brothers in Belfast is making a really energy efficient window now, you know, and you know, it has a seepage down to.
And that is great, but how much is more expensive is a Matthews Brothers window than a double pane window that I might get from Anderson or Pella or somebody like that.
But I think they all have had to raise their game, I guess, is my point. They're the products that they're coming out with now are better than what we were dealing with. And when you look at, you know, some of the older stock of houses that are out there, and you think of how they could get, you know,
What
more
would
energy
happen if we
efficient.
stopped making double pane windows and everybody wanted triple glazed windows?
Then
The
everybody-
price of triple glazed
Yeah.
window would come down.
Everybody freaked out because they couldn't have any light bulbs.
I was gonna say, Efficiency Maine needs to come up with some incentive programs to help drive the market. in that
Well,
direction.
for a retrofittable window, the savings you get out of there it's not energy cost effective. Because you don't save enough energy over the life of that window to pay for itself. That's why there's no efficiency
Right.
Maine incentive.
So we just need transparency in the real estate market, that you have to produce a year of bills for heating and energy.
Well, then there's the energy disclosure that, you know, would it be helpful too? So if a homeowner could get what the cost is to operate the house that they're about to purchase.
If that was a required part of the disclosures, that would be huge. But it has to be, not just those disclosures, it has to be like.
It is a requirement, but there's also a box that says unknown. So what do you think which box is being checked?
Yeah.
Unknown. So there's a lot of pieces to the puzzle.
It really.
I guess it's the way you can walk away. Thanks for your time.
Yeah, thank you. It was a pleasure to come to my first sustainability committee meeting, because I've heard of it for years, and I remember when it was the energy committee with Judy Roy, but thank you very much for having me, and I again apologize that Mason couldn't be here, and maybe we could come back to you sometime and talk about codes, because I think he'd be interested in doing it. It's just the timing today didn't.
Well, we're probably gonna, have to put some pen to paper at some juncture. As we start to look at how we wanna take on the tasks that we've been assigned, and that's coming from the comp plan. So
Well, thank you very much.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
You're welcome anytime.
I will note that we were worried about the design and the developer community when we put together the EV ordinance. It's been around and been through several projects and not boo.
Yeah.
It is working.
Yeah.
It is working, and we're not getting pushed back.
Yeah, but you also see that maybe I got this wrong, but you also see from your EV ordinance. Costco really didn't want to stand up to it, did they?
We didn't have
We
it.
didn't have it at the
All
time.
right, okay. But they didn't want to put in more than 4 EV chargers in the.
Trust me, I
parking lot.
still got my head for
That's
buildings for
that's
that
the
project.
point that I keep trying to make that, have,
Stupid can we be?
well, that. How do you get beyond, it's cheaper to do it this way right now?
Stop being bullied by big boys.
Kind of short.
We gotta stop being bullied by the
Kind of
big
short
boys.
term is.
Or we need to get our ordinances
Yeah,
in
or we need
place
to codify it.
that, to make sure that they don't have a choice.
Finally, though, if there's another grocery store coming to the Downs, it's gonna have the ordinance involved and everything else is. And there has been no balking on it.
So I
That's
only saw 4 EV chargers in Berlin, New Hampshire yesterday, and they were in the parking lot of the hospital.
Yeah.
And it may have been more, but it just jumped out at me that they had made the investment. Or got a grant or whatever, but they had 4 EV chargers in their parking.
And this committee too went the extra mile by saying, you don't have to have them installed, you don't have to do this, all we want to do is like
Like
have it.
conduit.
Put in the conduit and have it ready. Yeah, put in the conduit and have it ready. Now, that's very smart.
There's gonna be more EV chargers in the hotel that got approved that's gonna go by. The Gateway or the home or Lowe's and all that. That's gonna have 12 heads. In their parking spot, and they're gonna have the infrastructure to add more. But they're starting off because the ordinance said
Mhm.
5%.
Oh,
Yeah, so you either, and you mentioned a thing about intelligence, you either legislate the intelligence. Or you hope that people have enough brains to do the right thing without being told.
Combination.
And yet you just have to find incentive levers.
Yeah,
You
and
have
that's
to
what I was
figure
thinking.
And it shouldn't always be financial incentive.
Well, and that's where it's not
Because
even
that's-
transparency incentive.
Yeah, unfortunately, this country is always still being recorded.
We are, yeah.
Well,
I'm gonna.
yeah, I know you get back to work. Thanks a lot,
Yeah,
Kevin.
thank
Good to
you.
see you again.
Take care.
Thank you.
Nice meeting you all.
And we're at 9:25.
We're sorry, we're built on money, so,
We
One
should
other
probably
item
do-
that I want to introduce, and I don't know if Autumn, she's still with us, so if Autumn, you want to jump in here as well, but
I might have passed out.
there are, in the agenda packet, there were commercial lighting standards. Autumn pulled those together to update the commercial design standards and our site plan review ordinance. So she's looking for feedback from this group, not today, but just introducing it to you all and be prepared for our next meeting to go through that. So this is kind of the first step in the commercial design standards review that we talked about last meeting.
Thank you, Jamie. Yes, what I gave you all is what we have right now. So we have some information in chapter 405 site plan standards. And then we also have commercial design standards. And Rick is probably very familiar with those. Some of them are suggestions, some of them are requirements. Some of them are very specific and some are a little more subjective in their interpretation. So I've given you all that, I've color coded it so you can tell where it's coming from. And then I'm trying, as I go through these commercial design standards and site plan ordinance, I'm trying to create a format that flows through the different sections. So I've tried to arrange them all in a format that I think makes a little bit more sense and is easier to understand. But what I'm really looking for from you guys is some content and really making sure that we have the right standards, not really worried about the flow or the ordinance language, but the content, wanting to make sure that we get the sustainability committee's input on those things.
Thanks.
Well, thanks for throwing that at us.
You're welcome.
It's definitely outdated.
Yes.
And there's a lot of new things that can be incorporated that, and I appreciate what you said. Let's try to make it so it's less complicated to the reader and more understandable, because if they can understand it, then it's easier for them to follow. And,
Right.
It goes to the summary, and I bring it out in some of the planning board meetings, how I look at the min and max and the averages. Well, sometimes you don't get those on plans. There's no requirement to say you have to put it on there. I ask for it, usually they come back with it, so there's no pushback to get it. We should just get it
Upfront.
up front.
Low hanging.
And
Exactly.
we can it gives the staff the opportunity to work with the designer or the developer before it comes before a public hearing and before it becomes part of the planning board.
Yeah.
So we'll get on it.
Okay,
Promise you.
great. Thank you.
That was included as a PDF. I will put it in a Google Doc, so if people want to go through and make notes.
I think that would be
changes.
better. Yeah, and that way we can see, you can see it real time and you can ask questions. Anybody can ask questions and we can flag things.
Yeah,
That's
so
a good way to do
I'll
it.
send that out later on today as a Google Doc, so you all can access it. We can do quick updates. Autumn, do you have? See, I'm doing it again. April, do you
Oh, I
have?
was like, yeah, should I go first?
Do you have council update?
I don't have any council news to share with you necessarily as an update, but I did want to circle back to the conversation that we had started about creating a sustainability fund. And let you know that I had a great conversation with John. I sent Jamie my notes and I read them back and I was like, that just sounds very underwhelming, like that, John and I discussed this and he had the following questions. My recommendation would be that we invite John to come. You guys have the historical context on the plan that's on the website. I don't have that. And unfortunately, because when we changed over the website, I can't even watch like old minutes, like the background information is where I'm kind of really lacking on, what the thinking is behind that. the
Is
creation of that.
John agreeable to do that?
And I think John, I think John is absolutely agreeable to come, and I think probably starting here, rather than trying to prepare something to go to a finance committee meeting, is probably going to be more productive as a first conversation. And so that would be my recommendation, is that John and I are willing to pair and team on this and have that conversation with you guys and then figure out, okay, like at what point can we bring this to the finance committee level? What are going to be the council questions around this?
Mhm.
And
Do we have time to do that?
and so I'm gonna leave it to the committee.
Sounds like
when
an agenda item for next
they
month.
would like to have that, and I can check with John for his availability. But I also know you guys have other.
Yeah, there's other stuff
Priorities and
happening,
stuff.
and this is not gonna happen for this budget
Yeah.
period. I think that ship has long sailed, so
Yeah.
putting a goal.
Then
in
maybe
for-
next meeting is too soon and with all the other competing priorities.
And John's busy. I mean,
Hearing
finance-
that, I would rather us focus on the lighting ordinance.
Yeah.
And get this straightened out.
Yeah. put this
And
on-
keep that as an agenda item for a future meeting, but it's a very important conversation that we've
Let's
been
not
dying
miss
to
it for
have.
Another.
Right,
Well, and I would also kind of to speak to that is right now, John and I are in the positions that we're in. So let's strike on that while he's the finance chair and I'm your liaison and exactly. And so let's not push it too far down the road, because I do want to,
Okay,
So
capitalize on this
let's work on
relationship.
scheduling that as soon as
Yeah.
he is available. to
yeah,
have
we'll
that.
check, I'll check for both the June and July dates to
Yeah.
see if one of those two would work for John, and if not, then maybe we look for an alternate meeting date in one of those 2
Sure.
months that.
well, that's an
accommodate him.
awesome update.
okay,
Music
good.
to our ears,
Okay, awesome.
finally.
Planning board?
The cliff or the cliff building is gone. Did anybody notice that by the big 20?
Yeah,
It is going to be replaced with a modern looking building. So that's kind of exciting. It's starting to pick up our meetings. The last few meetings have been less than 4 hours and the last couple of meetings have been 4 hours. So that gives you a sense that the level of activity, no surprise, is now. They're gearing up for their summer work, spring, summer and fall work. And it's hot and heavy. We got a hotel that got approved. None Such Brewery is putting in an additional parking lot across the street. Now they're parking on 114 and it's a real hazard. The bonus on this is the pedestrian beacons are going in. I don't know the official term. I'm not the traffic person, but the buttons and the flashing lights so you can cross the street are going to be part of that project. So the folks from None Such Brewery have been very,
I think it's been a weird issue out there.
yeah, and so that to me is a big deal.
For construction.
And are
That's
they
always
planning
been-
for EV infrastructure? as
Yeah,
well?
they got the EV infrastructure in that too. So again, that was my big report out that I wanted to share, that the pushback on the EV hasn't occurred. So,
Maybe it won't on lighting either, once we get
well,
clarity on that.
yeah, I think if they understand why and they really thought about it, they're seeing the market change and they're saying, you're right, it is cheaper to put it in now than what Costco's gonna have to spend when even if they want to change their light fixtures in the parking lot or something like that, they're gonna have to bring it to current standards. And so now they're gonna be in trouble.
Rick, tell us how you feel about the Costco parking lot lighting.
Stand by for Stadium 22. No, they're gonna work with staff. We were told, so I'm hopeful and I know
Looking at.
Autumn will be very particular because I can promise you, I do have a light meter and when that happens, I'm gonna be out there at midnight on a dark day, a dark night, and I'm gonna give you the readings. So,
If you need help, call me.
okay. That's all I have.
Okay, great. And lastly is Conservation Commission. They just had a workshop with council last week to
Mhm.
talk about increasing conserved lands in Scarborough and how important that is. I think it went really well. So we'll see how that progresses beyond that workshop. They've asked the council to pass a resolution committing to 30 by 30,
30.
so conserving 30% of Scarborough's land by 2030. Whether there's enough land in Scarborough to hit that 30% conservation mark remains to be seen, but at least moving towards that will be a step in the right direction. And then they're also promoting No Mow May, which is basically you stop mowing for the month of May for pollinators, let the flowers in your lawn grow.
Can I have one of
Yes,
those to
that's
put on my
why I
lawn?
bought these.
I took one from the council meeting.
Thank you.
Wasn't that
So-
so?
Awesome.
If anybody is interested in participating in No Mow May, I've got signs.
This is something that we can use to promote the Scarborough Sustainability Day
Yes,
coming up in October.
yes, these little signs.
There you
Awesome.
go.
So we gotta mow this weekend.
Yeah,
Don't
mow-
mow.
Get it.
It's too wet, it's too wet by now.
I'm not gonna mow in June either, screw it.
I mean, that was the ongoing.
22 years.
Yeah.
No, I think that's great.
I
That's great.
practiced defensive mode.
Did our resolution for Earth Day,
The resolution did go
Thank
through
you,
for
council.
Thursday. Yes.
Better late than never.
I'll put this out by the street in front of my house.
And then people can't complain if you don't mow your lawn. I mean, they still will, but
I can-
you're doing it for the bees.
Yeah, we do a lot for the bees.
okay, I have to roll out of here.
That's all.
Motion to adjourn.
I like the sign.
All right, we got it.
Thanks all.
Thanks, everyone.
I
Good
just wanna
discussion.
know-
Thank you.